Good afternoon, PDHP parents and community. I'm Carrie Ann from the Program for the Development of Human Potential. I am the Parent and Community Outreach Coordinator for the agency. So Mondays we have been doing our little mindfulness segments. So last Monday we talked about, amongst other things, about communication. How to mindfully communicate. And we left off maybe saying that there's some roadblocks, like the kids play, roadblocks to communication that we have to be aware of. And, there's a lot of dialogue that needs to be had at this time. So I encourage you to have difficult conversations during this time. If we don't speak about what's going on in the world, no matter how tough it is, our kids are left to their own device to fill in those quiet spaces. So see them, hear them, have the conversation. Let's do the work, okay? And in that, let's talk about some tools that we can use. And these are tools that we can use anytime. There's a whole science of communication, and it seems like a lot of times anything and everything comes back to two things. From what I say, it's communication and it's empathy. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about roadblocks. So a lot of times as parents, as the caring adults in kids' lives, we want to jump in and we want to give good advice. We want to jump in and we want to teach from experience, or we want to question to get facts. Sometimes, while those are really good intentions, the attempts can sometimes cause our kids to create more problems than they can solve. The flow of communication changes, kind of stifles them from saying what they need to say. Sometimes they just need the space to be heard with you. And that's all it is. Think about the times that you just need to vent, right? So same thing for our kids. So there are a couple of roadblocks that happen very frequently in communication. And we'll talk about some attempts to strategize against those roadblocks, okay? So the first one would be ordering or commanding. You must, you have to, you will. Why is this a problem? It can produce a fearful response. It could produce resistance. It invites the concept of testing. It kind of gets us into this like battle or rebelliousness and retaliation. Okay. Warning or threatening. If you don't do this, then, or you'd better, or. So again, it creates that fear. It creates this idea of feeling submissive. It creates another area of testing, of threatening, of consequence that is so negative. It creates resentment, anger, rebellion, moralizing or preaching. You should, you ought to, it's your responsibility. So this creates obligation, it creates guilt, it creates shame. It helps to create a little more crack in the communication because then people feel defensive. It communicates a lack of trust. And a lot of times in our relationships in general, we need to build trust with our kids. So it kind of takes away from the trust that we're saying that we have in our children's efforts, in their abilities, in their responsibilities. Advising or giving solutions. What I would do is, why don't you let me suggest? So we're taking away the power to solve one's own problems. We're saying that they don't have the ability to solve their own problems. We take away this ability to think through a problem, to strategize, to consider alternatives, to try different things. This causes maybe a dependency. It causes maybe resistance. We also have the concept of persuading with logic or quote unquote good arguments. Here's why you're wrong. Here are facts. Yes, but. Okay. This also gives the opportunity for defensiveness to come up. It creates a counter argument approach. It often turns the person who is listening off. They quit listening to what you have to say. It could cause someone to feel inferior. It could cause them to feel inadequate. Judging, criticizing, and blame. You're not thinking, that's just because you're lazy and you're always in trouble. This implies that there's an incompetence, that there's poor judgment, that the communication ends because there's a fear of judgment, there's a fear of being yelled at, there's a fear of looking at negatively. Children can, and people who are really impressionable can accept that judgment that they hear as being true. So, therefore I am bad. I am stupid. I am lazy. They feel that that's a truth that's been put upon them. Child can also retaliate, and that creates, you're not great, you're not perfect, causing, now an argument to ensue. So some other things that we can do is also to be aware of praising and agreeing. I think you're doing a great job. You're right. That sounds awful. It implies maybe a high expectation or a push for a child to always do right. It can be seen as patronizing. It could be seen as manipulative. It can be seen as something that is angst producing. When a child's perception doesn't match that praise. Name calling or ridiculing. You're such a crybaby. Okay, smarty person, Mr. Smarty Pants. This can cause a child to feel unworthy or cause a child to feel unloved. It can have a devastating effect of image, self-image, and it often provokes a verbal retaliation. Analyzing and diagnosing is another roadblock in our communications. What's wrong with you is, or you're just tired, or I know you didn't mean it. This can be frustrating. This can be perceived as threatening. A child can feel trapped or exposed or not believed in. It stops a child from communicating for fear of distortion or exposure. Reassuring and sympathizing. Don't worry about it. You'll feel better tomorrow. Cheer up. It's not so bad. This causes a child to feel misunderstood. It can evoke feelings of hostility. Sometimes a child picks up a message as it's not all right for you to feel bad. We were talking about feelings, and sometimes feelings feel bad. But that's part of our science. That's part of our makeup. And the better we are to name it, we can tame it. We could find ways to cope. We could find ways to work around it, right? Probing and questioning. Why, who, what did you? Think about all those times, and a lot of times when I'm at parent workshops, people will say, especially as the kids are getting older, I ask all these questions after school and they don't want to answer, or they don't give me a full answer. Well, let's think about this. They kind of are feeling bombarded maybe. Maybe they just need that relief, that break, that, I'm just going to be here at home with you and that's it. So a child can learn from all of that, to take that pressure and reply to you with these non-answers or avoid or half-truths or even lies, They may not understand the intention of why we're asking those questions. They may become anxious and fearful. Something must be wrong, The child can lose sight of his or her problem while answering questions. So what they want to tell you, what they want to share with you, gets lost in all of that. And finally, diverting or sarcasm or withdrawal. Let's talk about more pleasant things. Why don't you try running the world? or being silent and turning away, or asking for someone else in the group to speak, really dismissing. It implies that life's difficulties are to be avoided rather than dealt with. It can infer children's problems are unimportant or petty or invalid. As we've been going through this whole series of mindfulness, we see that everyone experiences different things to a different degree, whether it's negative or positive. It stops the openness from a child when he or she is experiencing a difficulty. So it kind of puts that barrier up. We can't go any further now. So what are things that we can do? Think about last week when we talked about that communication skill. I always think about the parents who are like, I'm not getting any information from the kids. Set up the time and space, right? Let them maybe lead a little bit on that. That way we can all connect. You got your phone, put it down, put it away, turn it off. Lead by that example, because I think we're getting really caught up with our devices since we are isolated lately, and it's creating barriers with the people around us who we are in lockdown with. So take time to, establish that time off so that the communication and that connection is there. Look people in their eyes, sit across from them, mirror their body language. It becomes safe. Ask questions. Do your reflective work there. I hear you saying because. You seem to feel. That way they can then tell you if that's truth or not. You can also think about the idea of your iMessages and using them to your advantage. Remember, that leads with feeling. There's nothing wrong with feeling. You're really establishing and setting up an open conversation. I feel because, and then share that space. What are things that we can do? How can we solve the problem? I want more communication with you. I feel shut out because you go to your room right after school. And I want more communication with you. So how can we do that? And leave it to be a conversation. Maybe the child say, I just need like a half hour to get a snack and hang out. And then I'll come back and we can talk. Then they see the intention. They see the reasoning. It makes me think too of rules in our schools. In my classrooms, my kids were always so quiet in the hall. And that was one of the rules we had in some of the schools that I taught in. I always took time to set up why I was asking for that and what the reasoning would be behind it. If something happens, boys and girls, and I need to get that message to you and you're caught in your conversations when we're out and about, it's not safe for us. And they started to realize. And it really turned it, and I kept reminding, and I didn't realize that. And one of my senior teachers had brought it up, and she said, you remind them a lot. It's not just like a first day thing, it's a consistent thing. So remind them, give them that, give them the guidance, okay? So that is our Mindful Monday. I hope you are safe, I hope you are well, and I will see you for our What's Good Wednesday. Take care, PDHP parents and community.